harder being a playwright or a poet? I would say it's probably a lot more difficult to be a poet, and for a few reasons. I think in terms of the money, obviously poetry makes less, although both are paid pretty abysmally, and the grind is real for both. I think with playwriting though, I don't know if you ever go read like a Seinfeld script, you can see how much an actors really bring to the table, and a script can be saved. It's difficult to write just dialogue and to have the stage notes be an afterthought or background information for the cast and the director, but I think that like actors can bring a lot to the table, and with poetry you're really asking the readers to know what you mean, to feel engaged with something that a lot of people feel is archaic, and uh and you can't really clarify anything, whereas a play script or even like a show or a film script, you have a whole cast and crew that's there to give meaning to it. And so I think just in terms of what the audience has to process and how much help you get, I think poetry is more difficult. My style is image heavy. I spend a lot of time trying to think of images that are evocative and representative. I don't think it's just enough to have something that's evocative. I think readers have to and hear it and automatically associate it without any follow up. Um, and so I spend a lot of time trying to make the images in my work hit all five senses. Um, Sometimes they do a lot of work. Sometimes if I if I feel like I don't have the writing, the point I'm making is simple, or that a poem or a scene that I'm working on is to fill a gap, or if you want to call it like filler or something, like if it's not as uh if it's not complex or it doesn't have layers or whatever, I don't know. But imagery can do a lot to kind of fix that. And then I would say when it comes to editing, um like a poetry collection or a play, I'll strengthen the language throughout once I've got the completed whole, and try to find the pieces that I think are weaker, and work to bring those up to speed. Um, and then a lot of my editing goes into making sure that when I read these pieces that I feel like I like the flow, that it matches my voice, that I'm going to be able to add emphasis that you wouldn't get with just a reading. Like I do write, and I guess I'm talking about my poetry here. I do write my poetry uh to a certain extent with how I'm going to deliver it in mind. There's a performative aspect to poetry that I appreciate. When it comes to playwriting, my style is probably just write stuff that's funny. Think of funny situations. I use playwriting for comedy a lot more than I do anything else, really. Journey from a chemist to a writer. Um, when when I was in high school, I had an aptitude for science, and I loved my science teachers, but I didn't um enjoy being in labs, and that should have been a red flag. But I went to college and majored in chemistry anyway, and I loved it. Like I loved the theory, and I loved the challenge of being stumped by some of the upper level courses. Um, and I worked as a coatings chemist at Sherwin-Williams for a bit. Um, I think that when I was sitting in the lab, I remember just sitting there, kind of. I would listen to rap, or I'd listen to anybody I thought was lyrically compelling. Um, like Willie Nelson or Bob Dylan, or and I've always been a huge fan of rap, so I listened to a ton of that, and I would write poems in between tests at the lab bench, and eventually, after a few years of just recording numbers, I couldn't. I don't know. I just really felt like I needed to pursue something more creative, Uh, so I used grad school. I went to grad school and got my MFA, and the MFA was my attempt. It was my attempt to pivot because I felt like I needed a professional certification of some kind that would give me the kind of authority I would need to pursue writing more seriously, as opposed to just like writing a bunch and hoping it's good and hoping it'll get accepted. I felt like I needed some sort of structure. So I think the transition process from an old career to a new one was entirely based around just new education. Forms of expression. Yeah, I would love to try all sorts of stuff. I'm interested in writing of all kinds. I'm working on a novel right now, and I've been workshopping it with a group of fiction writers and mixing some poetry in there. And I think I'm excited about that. I like doing new things. I like being challenged by having a new purpose and a new audience to push myself. I remember reading The Hobbit when I was a kid and looking at it and saying, holy shit, like I can't believe one person thought of all the things in this whole book. It was written by one person. Like I'd watch a movie. You watch The Lion King, right? And the credits scroll for like 4.5 minutes. It's just like a million different people, like two different songs to show you the hundreds of people that worked on this film. But then I'd read The Hobbit and it's just one guy. So I've always kind of been obsessed with the idea of doing a fiction novel since I was a kid, and just waiting until I felt like I was capable and ready. But honestly, I'd like to write song lyrics, and I'd like to write I'd like to work on a video game project where I write the dialogue or come up with some of the story for that. um as long as the writing makes me feel like I can express myself in a different way that other mediums don't give me. Like I don't, I use poetry and playwriting for different things, is to channel different feelings, and I feel like fiction has been more of the same. It's given me a different avenue for thoughts and ideas that structurally just don't work in a poem or in a play. Um, and so I think as long as there a form is introduced to me where I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I can see myself getting something new out of this medium that I would have gotten out of something else, then I'd like to try whatever that is. My MFA was magical. I know some people get disillusioned by higher education. They'll go through it and but it really did a lot of good things for me. I responded well to the challenges. I liked the environment. I liked the playful competitiveness of it all. Like I liked the idea that everybody was supportive and positive, and maybe, and sometimes suspect that might be an extension of being a poetry program. Is that um, I don't want to generalize, but I do feel like poets tend to be more supportive and forgiving than maybe some of the counterparts in other genres. And if I'm being unfair, you feel free to tell me, but I think that is true. Grad school will always be competitive on some level. Um, I liked the structure. I liked the reading. It's different than undergrad, because in undergrad everybody's there to kind of meet and overcome things from growing up and socialize and try to see if, yes, this major is what I want to do. But in graduate school, most of the, if not all the people that are in a program typically want to be there, or at least committing themselves to financially and at a point in their working career that it makes sense to try a lot harder. So everybody's trying and everybody's really going after it. And I just got lucky with my program. I think the teachers I had were amazing. We had a study abroad program in Scotland. The program focused on, didn't just show us how to write, it taught us how to build profiles and navigate a career and apply to literary magazines and work on literary magazines. Like it was a program that had a lot of all around really great structure. I thank Arcadia University for that all the time. but it was tough. I was raised, I had both of my kids were very young. They were both, there was a brief time where they were both in diapers. Um, and I was working full time. So it also wasn't fun. It was just work. It was just a ton of work, and it didn't feel like it all the time because there's a lot of stuff about it I loved. And I maybe the best thing about an MFA program versus like a literary program where just like studying English, didn't have as many papers, but and there were, I was going through like mental health things. So, like there was like a whole, like it was just a struggle. It was like a long multi-year process, and a lot of stuff can happen to you personally in a few years. And just my department and my peers were supportive, so I have nothing bad to say about it, and I had everything to gain from it.